Hey, what's good, everybody? I'd like to welcome you all back to the Boombox Guru channel. I'm your host, LB. So I got a brand new CD update for you all today. Got five brand new CDs that I've gotten in the past couple of weeks that I want to talk to you about real briefly. But before I get into that video and get to talking about these records, I just ask for those of you who are viewing if you could just hit that like button, give me a thumbs up, as well as subscribe to the channel and share the video because it does help out this channel. So, first album that I'm going to talk about amongst this bunch is by Brats, 1980, which the album was released in 1980. So Brats were a Danish punk rock band that formed back in 1977. And what's very interesting about this band is that Brats actually would later evolve into the heavy metal band Merciful Fate. So Michael Denner and Hank Sherman were both members of this band. And then a little bit later on, King Diamond would actually join the band, replacing their original lead vocalist. Now on this particular album, because this is the only full length album that Bratz ever released, King Diamond doesn't perform on this album. This was before he joined the band. But this is some really great punk rock. You know, if you're somebody that's really into that late 70s, early 80s old school classic punk rock, this is definitely something that you would really enjoy. And although this album is particularly classified as punk, Bratz, their whole style, they definitely lean a lot into hard rock and heavy metal. There's a huge metallic nature about this whole entire album, and the guitar solos on here, the guitar solos aren't something that you would typically hear from punk bands, especially during this particular era. Like the guitar solos are very intricate, they're very melodic. They definitely fall more in line to what you would hear from a hard rock or heavy metal band. But yeah, Michael Denner, Hank Sherman, King Diamond, they would form the basis of what would later become Merciful Fate, and it actually all started right here with this band. And you could honestly say that Bratz, they were one of the earliest bands that fused punk rock with metal, you know, similar to what Motorhead did as well as the Plasmatics. But yeah, if you're somebody that's into that late 70s, early 80s punk rock, you know, just traditional punk rock with a little bit of leaning towards heavy metal and hard rock, this is definitely something that you would enjoy. So definitely check this album out. Physical copies are pretty easy to find. It is available online, like on YouTube. You can stream it on Spotify and such places. But for those of you who are huge fans of Merciful Fate or King Diamond, definitely go and check out this album, man, because it's some really good punk rock. All right, so next, well, these next two albums, I'm gonna kind of put them together because they're by the same band. But I have Manifest Destiny by the Dictators right here, and I also have, excuse me, I also have Bloodbrothers. So Manifest Destiny and Bloodbrothers, and both of these are reissues released by Music on CD. So I'm gonna talk about, I'm gonna talk about Manifest Destiny first because it was released in '77. Uh, yeah, this album, Manifest Destiny, this is the second album by the Dictators. The Dictators, New York punk rock band, formed I think in 1974, 73 maybe. They are considered one of the earliest American punk rock bands. Their first album, The Dictators Go Girl Crazy, laid the foundation of American punk. It was one of the first albums to lay the foundation of American punk rock, and it actually came out a year before the Ramones' self-titled debut. But this second album, Manifest Destiny, this record is definitely a lot more musical compared to that first album. This record, I don't know, there's keyboards and stuff that's added into the mix. It's just very musical. It's really hard for me to describe. I mean, the best point of reference I can give it is that it reminds me a lot of Cheap Trick. There's a lot of moments on here that kind of remind me a lot of like Cheap Trick, like that late '70s era of Cheap Trick. That's what it really reminds me of, like those very heavy riffs but very melodic and sort of catchy and poppy in some nature. It definitely has that vibe. But the second half of the album is my favorite. The second half of the album is my favorite because that's where the band really bring in some of that old school punk rock style. specifically the last song on the album called Search and Destroy. That is just the that is just the outright, excuse me, that's just the outright really great classic punk rock number. It's actually become one of my favorite Dictator songs. And what really got me into the Dictators and what really made me want to check out this album and piqued my interest in it was that Mark Mendoza, who is best known as being the bass player in Twisted Sister, he actually played on this album. I think this is him right there. That's him right there, as you can see right there playing the bass. But it's the only album that he did with the Dictators. And I remember on the Twisted Sister documentary, him briefly mentioning playing in the Dictators prior to him joining Twisted Sister. So, man, that was one of my main interests of wanting to check out this album and finally have a CD, a CD version of it. Excuse me, losing my train of thought. That's what really piqued my interest and wanted me to have a CD version and add this to my collection. But, you know, it's a pretty good album. You know, I like the first two records. They're pretty solid. I have heard the first album, the Dictators Go Girl Crazy, although I don't own a physical copy of it just yet. But this album right here, this is the band's third album, Bloodbrothers, released in 1978. This is my favorite Dictators album. This was the album that I heard that actually made me become a fan of the Dictators. You know, as much as I enjoyed those first two records, it was this one that I listened to that really made me want to go back and revisit those other albums. I really think that this is the Dictators' best album. A lot of critics describe this album as being their most rockin'est album, and I have to agree. I feel like everything that they did on the first two records, it all came together on this record. And even though it still retains that punk rock ethos, I gotta say that to me, this is really just a great late 70s hard rock album. It's just a really good record. Some of my favorites on here, Faster and Louder, the opening track, that really just sets the tone of the whole entire record. It actually has an uncredited appearance from Bruce Springsteen. Let's see, Baby Let's Twist, which was actually a minor hit for the band. Let's see here, the Minnesota Strip. The Minnesota Strip, the riff to that song is the same riff that Danzig used on his song called Snakes of Christ. And I remember when I first heard the Minnesota Strip, I could not place where I heard that riff before. And then when I went online and started reading comments on YouTube, that's when everybody kept saying, yeah, Danzig, Snakes for Christ, Danzig, Snakes for Christ, Snakes of Christ. And I was like, that's where I've heard that riff from. And not only just Danzig, but there's been plenty of other metal bands that have bit off that riff as well. Let's see here. I Stand Tall is a great one. Borneo Jimmy, What It Is, Slow Death. Pretty much this whole entire album. And this was also the first album where Handsome Dick Manitoba actually performed all the lead vocals. Because on the first two records, Andy Chernoff did most of the vocals, while Manitoba would pop up on songs here and there and share vocals with Andy Chernoff. And to tell you the truth, I think him becoming the lead vocalist and performing all the leads, I think that was better for the band. Not to take anything away from Andy Chernoff, but, you know, Manitoba may not have been the greatest vocalist, but he had a charisma, and there was just something about his style that really worked with the band's style. But Bloodbrothers, I really enjoyed this record. One of the best, like, punk rock, hard rock albums ever. Definitely check out this record. One of my favorites from the Dictators. Highly recommend this one. All right, so this next album, I've actually had this album for quite a while. I think I might have bought it around the first of, I don't know, this year, maybe sometime around last year. I might have bought this album, so it's not as recent as some of the other ones on here. But this album is Ramones, Mondo Bizarro, released in 1992. And if I'm correct, this was the first album that they did with CJ Ramone, I believe. I think this was the first official album with him. And I think it was the first without Dee Dee Ramone. Although, I believe Dee Dee Ramone, even though he wasn't a full-time member of the band anymore, he was still very much a part of the writing process of the album and so forth. Now, this album, I think, is a very underrated album by the Ramones. If you go and look at videos of people ranking the Ramones albums, people tend to really rank this album pretty low. I don't know, a lot of people just seem to don't like this album, or they consider it to be one of the band's worst records. I don't agree with that. It may not be one of their best records. You know, I wouldn't put it up there with the first, 4 albums. Definitely wouldn't put it up there. But it's a good record. It's got some great songs on here, man. It's catchy. It's punk. It's got a lot of great vocals from Joey Ramone. I mean, some of my favorites on here: Censor Ish, The Job That Ate My Brain, Poison Heart, Strength to Endure, Main Man. Let's see here. Heidi is a head case. Cabby's on crack. There's just a lot of really great songs on here. Anxiety, I really enjoy this song. I really enjoy a lot of these songs. There may be a couple of songs on here that I'm not all that crazy about, but for the most part, I really think that Mondo Bizarro was a really strong record. I think it's got some really good tunes on here, and I found myself listening to it a lot. So don't listen to what everybody else says about Mondo Bizarro. Definitely go and check the album out for yourself and form your own opinions on it. Because me personally, I really think it's a really good Ramones album. Alright, so this next album, this last one, is this the last album, but it's definitely not least. Man, I've been wanting to own a physical copy of this particular CD for a long time. In the past, I wanted to buy the CD versions, and the album was just too expensive. It was just way too expensive. But thankfully, the price of CDs, even used CDs, even rare gems, have gone down, and I was fortunate to find a particular version of this album, of this CD, for a good price on eBay, and that is Cro-Mags, The Age of Quarrel, released in 1986. Man, I'm really excited to finally own a physical CD copy of this album. If you watched one of my Boombox Talk episodes from last year, or maybe a couple of years ago, I talked about how I got ripped off on Discogs, how I thought I was purchasing this on CD, and they sent me like some weird Paul McCartney CD. I don't know what it was. I don't even know what I did with that CD. I might have sent it back or something. But anyway, Cro-Mags, The Age of Quarrel. This is one of the greatest hardcore punk albums to ever be released. Some people would say it's the greatest hardcore punk album ever to be released, and I wouldn't even argue with that. But this record was a huge influence, not only in punk rock, but just on the whole musical landscape. So many bands, excuse me, even people who may not, excuse me, even artists who may not even fall into the hardcore label were influenced by this album. This was a very influential record. The Age of Quarrel really helped set the tone. It really set the tone of the East Coast hardcore scene, specifically the New York hardcore scene. If you really want to know what the New York hardcore scene really sounds like, then this is the record that you need to pick up, because it really defines that whole era, that 1980s New York hardcore era, where so many heavy hardcore bands were coming out. And this record was one of the first albums that really bridged the gap between the hardcore scene and the metal scene. Because you got to understand, there was a point where punks and metalheads did not get along with each other. And this was one of those records that really helped bring those two scenes together. Because the album was punk enough for the hardcore scene, but it was also heavy and metallic enough that the metalheads even enjoyed it. But this record has got so many classics on here. I mean, you know, of course, the opening track, We Gotta Know, which that video was one of the first videos on MTV to showcase slam dancing. But so many great songs on here. Street Justice, World Peace, Show No Mercy, Malfunction. I mean, this is just one of the... I was just really excited to finally find a copy of this album for a reasonable price, and to be able to now to have it in my collection. And I did make sure that I had an official copy. I went on Discogs. I looked up the little number on the side and went on Discogs, and I do own an official copy, because I know there's a lot of bootleg versions of this album that are floating around. And this is just one of my best purchases. It's one of my greatest purchases, man, because this album is very rare these days because of all the whole issues between the band members and so forth. But man, if you really want to know what hardcore punk sounds like, if you really want to know what the New York hardcore scene, this is the record to get, because this is one of those records that really defines that particular era of music, and it still continues to have a huge influence on so many bands. Right now I've noticed that we're having like a revival of like that heavy hardcore sound from a lot of bands right now, and I can hear the influence that the Age of Quarrel has had on a lot of those bands. So this is, man, one of the best hardcore albums ever. I'm just really excited to finally have it in my collection. Definitely go get that. If you can't find a physical copy, it is available digitally. It is on Spotify and so forth. So if you never listened to the record, go on YouTube, go on Spotify, wherever you consume your music, and check it out. One of the greatest hardcore albums ever. But yeah, that's it for this episode of CD updates. I don't even remember. I don't even know what number CD update I'm on, because this is one of the first CD updates I've done in quite some time. And I got so much music that I've purchased, man, that I could do like several videos of them. But I just wanted to do this quick little video showing you what I got right now. Hope you guys enjoy that. If you've never heard any of these albums that I've shown in this video, definitely go check them out. They're real good music, real good punk, rock, and hardcore. Definitely go check these records out. But that's it for today's video. And once again, if you did enjoy this video, please give me a thumbs up and give me a like, as well as subscribe to the channel and share the video. Also, we'll get a shout out to everybody that's been watching the channel and that's been subscribing to the channel. I'm almost at 500 subscribers. I know that's not really a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, but it means a lot to me that people are seeing my videos and they're subscribing to the channel. So I appreciate each and every one of you for doing that. And as always, hope everybody has a blessed day, a blessed week. Love, peace, and music. Peace out.